There's peanut in everything she cooks." Callum Rhodes stopped in the middle of his own kitchen with a plate in one hand. The girl had not looked up. She was at the far end of the island where she always was at 4 in the afternoon, a math book open, a pencil going, her feet swinging off a stool that was too tall for her. 9 years old. She had said it the way you say the sky is grey. 4 feet away, at the range, her mother had gone completely still. "Simone." Yvette Marsh set the pan down. She did it carefully, which was somehow worse than dropping it. "Simone, what did you just say?" "I said there's peanut in—" "Don't." Yvette's hand came up. "Don't say it again." Callum looked from one of them to the other and understood, about a second too late, what the child's sentence sounded like out loud. In a house where the cook had cooked for 6 years. In a house where the man who owned it had been allergic to peanuts since he was 6 years old, so severely that there had not been a jar of it under that roof in a decade. He put the plate down on the counter. "Mr. Rhodes." Yvette had her hands flat on the range rail. Her voice was very level, and it was costing her everything. "I am so sorry. She doesn't know what she's saying." "I do know." "Simone, I checked." The girl looked up now. She had a face that gave nothing away at all, and she was not frightened, which was the thing Callum kept coming back to afterwards. "I check everything. You told me to check everything." "I told you to check labels, not to—" Yvette stopped herself and started again, quieter, and it was the quiet that made it terrible. "Baby, go upstairs." "Mum, upstairs, now please." And the child closed her book and got down off the stool and went, and did not slam anything and did not argue and did not look back. Her pencil stayed on the island where she had left it. Callum found himself staring at it. "She's 9, Yvette said, into the silence. "She hears things. She doesn't mean anything by it." "It's all right." "It isn't all right." She turned around and faced him, and her chin was up. "She just accused me, in my kitchen in front of you, of nearly killing you. I need you to know I understand exactly what that was." "Mrs. Marsh, 6 years." Her voice did not rise. "6 years, and I have never once had a mistake in this house, and I know what happens to a cook that people start to wonder about." "Nobody is wondering," Callum said, and meant it, and heard how thin it was in the air. He should have let it go there. He knew that later too. Instead, he stayed where he was, with the plate going cold beside him, and said, "Has anything come into the house? Anything new? Something from a supplier or a gift or—" "No." Flat. "Nothing comes into this house that I do not open myself. Nothing has changed in the pantry in 3 years except what I changed." Which was true, and he believed her, and both of those things stayed true right up until the moment they didn't. The front door went. "Only me," Camille called from the hall in the voice of a woman arriving somewhere she is glad to be, and 30 seconds later she was in the kitchen with her coat still on and her bag on her arm, kissing the side of his head, saying something about the traffic on the bridge. She was very good in a room. That was not a performance, and he had never once thought it was. Camille Ashford liked people and people liked her back, and in 19 minutes at a table she would find out the name of your daughter and remember it a year later. She read the room in about 4 seconds. "What's happened?" "Nothing," Yvette said. "Yvette!" "A misunderstanding with my daughter. It's dealt with." "Oh, Lord." Camille laughed, warm, and put her bag down, and went and stood next to Yvette at the range in a way that no employer's fiancée had ever stood next to her before, and said something too quiet for Callum to hear, and Yvette actually smiled. Half of one. "There. Whatever it was. Children say things. I once told a whole dinner party my father was a spy." She turned. "Are we eating?" "Because I have to be up at 6. The lawyers want everything sorted before the restructure, and I swear it's 22 days and they want it yesterday." 22 days, Callum said. 22 days, and then you can sleep." She was going through the mail on the counter, one-handed, still in her coat. "You look grey, by the way." "I'm fine." "You always say that." She said it fondly, to the envelopes. Later, much later, he would try to remember whether she had touched anything, and would find that he could not. because there had been no reason on earth to watch her. He ate at 8. He worked until midnight. And at some point in that quiet stretch of the night, when a man does the accounting he has been avoiding, Callum Rhodes sat back from his screen and tried to work out how many times he had been ill this year. He got to 4, without effort. Then he got to 6. Then he stopped, because 6 was already more than he had had in the previous 3 years put together, and because his hand had stopped moving on the desk, and because from the top of the stairs he could hear a child's door being closed very gently by somebody trying not to wake anyone. If that first minute got you, do me a kindness. Hit like and share this with somebody who would want to hear it. Tell us in the comments where in the world you are watching from tonight, because we really do read them. And subscribe, so the next story finds you on its own. She was not in the kitchen the next afternoon. He noticed it at 4:10, which told him something about how long the girl had been sitting at that island, and about how little attention he had ever paid to the fact. He found her outside, on the low wall by the service gate, with the math book on her knees. "Are you allowed out here?" "I'm allowed out here." She did not look up. "I'm not allowed in the kitchen." "Since yesterday." Callum stood there with his hands in his pockets, 41 years old, worth more money than he could spend, entirely unsure how to begin a conversation with a 9-year-old on a wall. "Say it again," he said. "What you said yesterday." She looked up. "Why?" "Because I've been awake since 4 in the morning, and I want to hear it again." "There's peanut in everything she cooks." "Exactly the same. Same speed, same flat certainty." "You mean your mother?" "I mean the food." A small frown, the frown of a child being asked to explain something obvious. "My mom cooks it. So it's in what she cooks." "That isn't the same as your mother putting it there." "I know," Simone said. "That's what I said." And Callum stood very still on his own driveway, because he had heard the sentence 3 times now, and only just heard it. "All right." He sat down on the wall. It was cold and slightly damp, and he did not care. "Tell me why you think it." "Because you get sick." "People get sick." 9 times, she said. He turned his head. 9 times this year. She had gone back to her book. "You went upstairs and the doctor came twice. Once you were on the floor in the hall and Desmond had the pen thing, and my mom made me go and sit in the pantry. You counted." "I count things." She said it the way another child would say she liked horses. 9 times. And all of them were days when she was home. The afternoon went on around them, birds and a lawnmower 2 gardens over, and Callum Rhodes sat on a wall in his own grounds and felt something cold begin at the base of his neck. "Simone, listen to me. Camille is here most days. That would be true of nearly any—" "She washes the spoon," Simone said. "What?" "When she cooks your plate, she does the sink after. Just the 1 spoon." Simone turned a page. "She's never washed anything. Not one thing, not ever, not a cup. And my mom does everything else in that kitchen. But when she cooks your plate, she stands at the sink and washes the little spoon herself and dries it and puts it back in the drawer." Callum did not say anything for a long moment. Nobody invents that. A child cannot invent the detail that the only object a woman has ever cleaned with her own hands in 6 years is a single teaspoon. You cannot get there by disliking somebody. You can only get there by being in a room, day after day, at the end of an island, while the adults forget you are there. "How long has she been doing that?" "Since about my birthday." "When was your birthday?" "April." 11 weeks. He did the arithmetic without meaning to, and did not like where it landed. "Simone." He waited until she looked at him. "Have you told anyone else this?" "I told my mom." "And?" She looked back down at the book, and her voice did not change at all, which was how he knew. "She told me. I nearly cost her her job." He walked back up to the house on legs that did not feel like his, and let himself into a kitchen that smelled the way it always smelled, and there was nothing wrong in it anywhere. Copper on the wall. His own cookbooks. A woman he had trusted for 6 years who was not there, because he had let her send her own daughter out of the room and had said nothing at all. That evening Camille cooked. She did it happily, with her coat over a chair, talking the whole time about the restructure and the lawyer with the terrible tie, and she set a plate down in front of him and kissed the top of his head. Then she went to the sink and washed one small spoon and dried it and put it back in the drawer and went on talking. Callum looked at the plate for perhaps 3 seconds longer than a man normally looks at a plate. Then he picked up his fork and started to eat and said that it was very good. The finding came out of a cold store on a Tuesday. It was real. That was the thing about it that Callum could not get past afterwards. There was nothing invented anywhere in it. A temperature log with a gap in it. A tray of stock in the wrong place on the wrong shelf. Small, procedural, the sort of thing that happens in every kitchen in the country and gets fixed in an afternoon. Except that in this house it went onto a household account, and the household account went to an agency, and by Thursday Yvette Marsh had been suspended without pay pending a review. Camille was devastated about it. "I want to be completely clear with you," she said, in the hall, with her hand on Yvette's arm. "This is nothing whatsoever to do with the business with your little girl. Nothing. I want you to hear me say that. I hear you. It's a paperwork thing and it's stupid, and I'm furious about it, honestly." She turned to Callum. "Can we not just—" "It's an agency matter," Desmond said from the door. He said it the way he said everything, carefully and without any weight at all. "There's a process." "Well, the process is idiotic." And Yvette stood in the hall in her coat with her bag on her shoulder and said, "Thank you," and said it to Camille, because Camille was the one who had defended her. Callum watched all of it and said almost nothing, and hated himself for it. Here is what a suspension without pay is when you are a cook. It is not a gap in your income. It is a finding, and a finding follows you, and there is no box on any form anywhere for the sentence that would have explained it. The log had a gap because she was in the walk-in for 4 minutes, on the afternoon her daughter had just been sent home. 2 private houses that had wanted her the previous spring stopped answering inside a fortnight. The agency was kind and said the words "once this is resolved" several times, and Yvette, who had been in this business since she was 19, knew exactly what those words were worth. She sat at her own kitchen table on the Friday with the rent and the school and the car in 3 separate piles and moved a number from one pile to another and back again. And her daughter was barred from the house. That was the part that had no arithmetic in it. Simone was no longer to come to the grounds after school. She was to go to a neighbour's, 3 streets over, and sit in a front room with a television on, and be collected at 6. "Why can't I go to the wall?" "Because you can't. I'm not in the kitchen. I'm outside the kitchen. The wall isn't even—" "Simone." "He talked to me," Simone said. "Mr. Rhodes did. He came out and sat on the wall, and I told him about the 9 times, and he listened. He actually—" "Stop." It came out much harder than Yvette had meant it to, and the room went quiet, and the 2 of them stood in it. "You told him again." Yvette's voice was shaking now. "After all of it. After I stood in that kitchen and apologized for you, you went out and told him again." "It's true. It does not matter whether it's true." She heard herself say it and could not take it back. "Do you understand me? It does not matter. It is not a thing we can afford for it to be true. There are people in this world who get to say whatever they've noticed, and there are people who don't. And baby, I need you to understand which one we are." Simone looked at her for a moment with an expression that Yvette would think about for a long time afterwards. "Okay," she said, and went and got her book, and sat down at the table and did her homework, and did not say anything else about it at all. And that, the not saying anything, sat in that flat for the rest of the week like a third person. Yvette woke at 3 that night and lay in the dark and did not think about money. She thought about the kitchen, about the way her daughter checked things, out loud every time since she was 6, because Yvette had taught her to, because in that house you check. She thought about how she had never once, in 3 years, known that child to be wrong about a label. And she thought, I did not disbelieve her, because it was unlikely. She lay there a long time with that one. Across the city, in a house with copper on the walls, Callum Rhodes picked up his phone at midnight to reverse a suspension, and got as far as the agency's number, and put the phone face down on the desk. Because if the cook came back tomorrow morning, then the man who had reinstated her had a reason. And the woman asleep upstairs was clever, and she knew him, and she would find that reason inside a week. He sat in the dark and understood that he had just chosen deliberately to leave a woman without wages in order to keep somebody comfortable. It was the worst thing he had ever done, and he was going to have to keep doing it. He worked it through the way he worked everything through, which was on paper he then burned. Fire Camille, and what happens? She goes. That is all that happens. She is out of the house by the weekend, and she waits. And somewhere along the way she finds a quieter method. And he never learns who else under his own roof has been carrying her instructions without knowing it. Call the police. And what happens? A child counted 9 illnesses. A woman washes a spoon. He could hear how that sounded. He had spent 17 years learning how a thing lands on somebody hearing it for the first time, and this landed like a rich man who did not want to get married. Which left one option, and it was so simple that it took him 3 days to make himself look straight at it. He had to keep eating. The first plate was on a Monday. Camille cooked because she liked cooking on Mondays, and she talked the whole time about a woman on the board who had worn the same jacket to 3 separate meetings, and she set the plate down in front of him and went to the sink. Callum sat looking at it. He had an injector in his jacket pocket, 1 arm's length away, and he had told Desmond to keep the car on the drive with the keys in it, and had given no reason. He picked up his fork, and he ate. Nothing happened. He went to bed, and lay awake with his hand on his own chest like an idiot, waiting, and fell asleep at some point, and in the morning he was completely fine, and that was almost worse. The Thursday one did something. It came on after about 40 minutes as a warmth in his face and then a thickness at the back of his throat, and he stood up from the table and said, quite calmly, that he thought he had better go and lie down. What he remembered afterwards was Camille. She was up before he had finished the sentence. She had the injector out of his jacket and in her hand before he had got to the door. She was frightened, genuinely, visibly frightened, her hands not steady, saying his name, telling Desmond to bring the car round, kneeling on the floor beside him with her palm flat on his back, saying, "Breathe, just breathe, look at me." He did not need the injector in the end. It went down on its own over an hour in a dark room with the door shut. Nobody called an ambulance. Nobody had called one for any of the 9. Dr. Bramwell came to the house. He had come to that house since Callum's father was alive. He was very good and very discreet, and he arrived in a grey car about 40 minutes after somebody telephoned him. It was always Camille who telephoned him, but he lay on that bed in the dark, listening to her on the phone to the doctor in the hall. No, it was the 3rd one this year. No, he would not hear of it. Honestly, she was at her wits' end with him, and he could not make it fit. She had been terrified. He had watched her be terrified. It took him most of that night to arrive at the answer, and the answer was the coldest thing in the whole business. She had not been pretending. She did not want him to die on a Thursday in his own dining room with only the staff there. She wanted him to die at the tasting, in front of 400 people, of something everybody had already agreed was going to happen. And underneath that, there was a second thing, and it took him until nearly dawn to get to it. After the 3rd reaction, certainly after the 5th, somebody should have torn his kitchen apart. That is what happens to a man in his 40s who starts reacting to food he has eaten safely for 20 years. An allergist in the pantry, every tin opened, every supplier letter read out loud, somebody standing in that room writing things down. It had never happened. Not once, in 9 reactions and 11 weeks. And when he made himself remember why, it was always the same, a warm voice on the telephone in the hall, being marvellous about him, explaining to a doctor who had known him since he was a boy that Callum was impossible about his own health and would not hear of a fuss being made. Simone saw the doctor's car. She was not supposed to be anywhere near the house, and she was not. She was on the pavement outside the service gate at 6:20, where the neighbour walked her to meet her mother, and she stopped and watched a grey car she recognised come out of the drive. 10, she said, to nobody. The next afternoon, Callum walked down his own drive, out of his own gate, and stood on a public pavement to talk to a 9-year-old through a fence, because that was where the conversation had to happen now. "You shouldn't be talking to me," Simone said. "My mom got suspended." "I know. I did that. Not on purpose, but I did it, and I'm going to fix it, and I can't fix it yet." She thought about that. "Okay," she said. You counted a 10th. The doctor came. Yes, that's 10. She had her fingers through the chain link. Are you eating it on purpose? Callum looked at this child for a long moment. Yes, he said. He did not explain it and did not soften it, and she did not ask him to, and something passed between the two of them through a fence that he could not have described to another adult. The jar changed, Simone said. What? In the door of the second fridge, the one with no label. She shrugged. It's a different shape now. It was tall, and now it's the short kind. And Callum Rhodes stood on the pavement with his hands on a chain-link fence and felt the entire architecture of the last 3 weeks tilt, because he had been watching a jar. You do not hide a thing in the door of a refrigerator that a cook opens 40 times a day. You hide it somewhere she opens it without looking. Desmond Vale had run that house for 19 years. He was there before the second restaurant and before the money, and he had a way of being in a room without being in it that Callum had stopped noticing somewhere around the 8th year. He knew which side of the hall the post went on. He knew that the man he worked for did not like being handed things. In 19 years, Callum had never asked him a single question about his own life. He worked that out standing in a pantry doorway on a Tuesday evening, and it landed on him like a dropped shelf. It was Simone who got there first. She could not come to the house, but the bins went out to the service road on Wednesdays, and a 9-year-old on a public pavement can talk to anybody she likes. Mr. Vale. Hello, Simone. He did not stop what he was doing, but he said it kindly. You're not to be up here. I'm on the road. The road's allowed. She had her fingers in the fence again. Why did you change the shop? Desmond straightened up. What? The oil and the flour and the bits. My mom used to open the boxes on a Thursday, and they had the green writing. Now they come Tuesday, and the writing's blue. She said it without any weight at all. So you changed the shop. Why? Desmond Vale stood in a service road holding a bin lid and did not have an answer, and the not having of it followed him back up the drive and into the house and sat with him through the whole evening. He came to Callum himself the following night in the pantry, which was where they ended up, because it was the only room in that house where nobody would think to look for either of them. May I ask you something, sir? You can ask me anything. Has your allergy worsened? Callum put down the tin he had been holding. No, he said. Say the rest of it. And Desmond said the rest of it, standing very straight with his hands at his sides, the way a man delivers something he has been carrying. Camille had sat him down, 9 or 10 weeks ago, in the morning room, with the door shut. She had been very kind about it, and quite emotional. The allergy had worsened with age. It did that, apparently, in some people. Callum would not hear a word about it, and would not have it discussed, and was frankly impossible about his own health, which Desmond knew to be true because it was true. The doctor had recommended changing certain suppliers. Cross-contamination in processing plants, she said. Nothing anyone could see. It had to be done quietly, because if Callum found out that arrangements were being made behind his back over his health, he would refuse out of pride and it might kill him. She asked me not to tell you, Desmond said. And I did not tell you. Because a doctor was mentioned. Because a doctor was mentioned. He swallowed. And because she is going to be your wife, sir. And it is not my place. Callum stood in his own pantry and looked at a shelf of tins. Desmond, who orders it? I do. On what? The standing account, same as everything. A pause. It comes in on the Tuesday. Neither of them said anything for a while. Somewhere upstairs a floorboard went, and both of them looked at the ceiling, and then at each other, and it occurred to Callum that this was what it felt like to be a stranger in your own house. I have been buying it, Desmond said. His voice had gone. For 10 weeks. I have been carrying it in from the van myself. Yes. Sir, don't. Callum said it quietly. If you apologize now, I will have to tell you it's all right and it isn't, and you'll believe me. And you shouldn't. A clever woman told a decent man a kind story, and the decent man did what he was told. That's the whole trick. It doesn't need you to be a bad man. It only needs you to be one who assumes she knows more than you do. Desmond stood there and held it. What would you like me to do? Nothing. Callum picked the tin back up and turned it over in his hands. Order exactly what you have been ordering. Carry it in from the van. Put it where you put it. Say nothing to anyone, including me, for 2 weeks. You want it to keep coming into the house. I want everything in this house to look exactly the way it looked last Tuesday. Desmond turned to go and stopped in the doorway. Desmond. Callum had not planned to say it. Are you married? The old man looked back at him. Widowed, sir. 11 years in September. 11 years. Callum stood with the tin still in his hands. I've known you 19, and I didn't know that. You weren't unkind about it, sir. You simply never asked. No, Callum said. I never asked. They stood there a moment, and something in the pantry shifted very slightly and did not shift back. Then Desmond nodded slowly and did the thing he had not done once in 19 years of service, which was to ask a question of his own. And what happens at the tasting, sir? Callum looked up. Why the tasting? Because it is the only night this month when there will be people in this house who matter, Desmond said. If I were arranging something to be seen and believed, I would arrange it for then. The two men stood in the pantry. Yes, Callum said. So would I. The flat was on the 3rd floor and the buzzer had been broken since March. Yvette opened her own door 4 inches on a chain and looked at the man standing on her landing in a coat that had cost more than everything in her hallway, and her face did not move at all. No, she said. You don't know what I'm going to ask. You're going to ask me to come back? Yes. No. She started to close it. He did not put his hand out, which was the only reason she stopped. Mrs. Marsh, I've suspended you without pay for 3 weeks over a temperature log, and I knew it was wrong the day it happened. I'm not here to make that comfortable. I'm here because I need to be in a room with the only 2 people in my life who have told me the truth this year, and one of them is 9. The chain came off. She did not invite him in. She stood in the doorway with her arms folded and the television going somewhere behind her, and she made him say all of it standing up. He said all of it, the 9 times. The spoon, the 10th, the pantry, Desmond, and what Desmond had been carrying in from the van for 10 weeks in good faith. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Get somebody else. There isn't anybody else. There is a whole city of cooks. There is nobody else who knows that kitchen, Callum said. And there is nobody else in the world who was told the truth by that child and got it wrong. I need somebody in that room who already knows what it costs to not listen to her. And Yvette Marsh, who had not cried once in 3 weeks, had to look at the wall for a second. You know what you're actually asking me, she said. You're asking me to walk back in there and stand at that range and cook, knowing. That's what you want, me at the stove, same as always. Yes. So that nothing looks different. Yes. Because if I don't, she stops. Yvette said it slowly, working it as she went. And if she stops, you've got nothing, and I've got a finding on my name for the rest of my life, and my daughter grows up knowing that being right about something is what did it. Callum did not answer that, because there was no answer to it. I didn't disbelieve her because it was unlikely, Yvette said. He waited. I want to say that out loud to somebody, because I've been carrying it for 3 weeks. Her voice was very steady and very quiet. I've known that child since before she could talk. She has never once been wrong about a label, not once. I didn't disbelieve her, Mr. Rhodes. I disbelieved her because believing her was going to cost me my job, and I did the sum in about 1.5 seconds, and I sent her out of my kitchen. Behind her, a door opened in the hall. It's the jar, Simone said. Both adults turned around. It's not the jar, her mother said. It is. It changed shape. I told him. Baby. Yvette turned all the way round. Listen to me. Think about where that jar is. Simone frowned. In the fridge door. In the fridge door. And who opens that fridge? You do. 40 times a day. Every day. 6 years. Yvette was not talking to a child anymore. She was talking the way she talked to a second cook, fast and level. If I am the one who is going to be standing there when it happens, and I open that door 40 times a day, and I check things, then whatever it is not in that door. Callum felt the floor of the whole thing move. She put it where you don't look, he said. There isn't anywhere I don't look. Yvette stopped. Except the things that don't change. She stood in her own hallway with her hand over her mouth. The oil, she said. Desmond reorders the oil. The oil comes in on the standing account. Same tin, same shelf, same everything. I have not read that label in 3 years because I have no reason on this earth to read it. It is the one thing in that kitchen that is always the same. She looked up. And it changed. Mr. Rhodes, it changed months ago. The pour changed. It ran thinner off the spoon, and I thought the batch was different, and I thought nothing of it, and I have been cooking with it every single day since. The 3 of them stood in a small hallway on the 3rd floor. One night, Yvette said at last. Mrs. Marsh, one night, the tasting. I come back for the tasting, and I stand at that range, and I cook the way I always cook. She had her chin up again. But we do it my way. I'm going to tell you exactly how it goes, and you're not going to change any part of it, and you're going to keep eating until then, so she doesn't smell it. Can you do that? Yes. Then say it back to me, Yvette said. Because you've got 9 days left, and I need to know you understand that you are the bait. They laid 40 covers in the long room and opened the doors at 7. The investors came, and the group's senior people came, and the head chefs of 6 of the 26 rooms came in their own whites, because Callum had asked for it years ago, and it had become a thing. 2 days to the restructure. Everyone in that house was in a good mood. Camille was extraordinary. She had a word for every single person who came through the door, and it was the right word. She put a nervous young sous chef next to the one investor who had also started as a nervous young sous chef, and by the 2nd course they were laughing like brothers. She was warm and quick and generous, and she was not performing any of it, and Callum stood at the end of his own room and watched the woman he had asked to marry him be genuinely delightful to 40 people. In the kitchen, Yvette Marsh worked her range in silence with her sleeves rolled. She had come in at 2. She had said good afternoon to the staff who had known her for 6 years and had not answered a single question about where she had been, and she had cooked the way she always cooked, and nobody watching her would have seen anything at all. Simone sat on a crate by the back door with a book she was not reading. At 9, between the fish and the main, Camille stood up and tapped a glass. I'm going to embarrass him, she said, and the room laughed before she had finished the sentence. I do the main tonight, just his. He'll tell you I can't cook, and he's right, and I do it anyway, once a year, badly, because the man has fed everybody in this room and nobody ever feeds him. The room made a warm noise. So, she said, somebody has to. She went through to the kitchen herself and came back 4 minutes later carrying 1 plate, and she set it down in front of him with a small flourish and put her hand flat on his shoulder for a second as she straightened up. It smelled extremely good. Callum Rhodes looked at the plate for a moment. Then he picked up his fork and turned it over once in his fingers and put it down on the tablecloth. Would you eat it? The room did not go quiet at once. It went quiet in a wave, from his end outward, as the people nearest realized something had happened, and the people further away turned to see what. Camille laughed. Would you eat it? Callum said. It's not a difficult question. Callum, still smiling, puzzled and fond, the exact right note. It's your dinner. There's plenty. Take my fork. Sweetheart, you're being... Take the fork, Camille. And there it was, in front of 40 people, a woman standing beside a plate she had cooked with her own hands, being asked to have a mouthful of it, not taking the fork. She tried the second exit, and it was a good one. Her chin came up, and her voice cooled, and she said quite quietly, I don't to know what this is, but I'm not going to be spoken to like this in front of your board. And she made it sound wounded and dignified. And 1 or 2 people at the far end actually shifted in their seats on her behalf. Callum did not move. Take the fork. Then she went for the 3rd, and the 3rd was the worst, because it was concern. She crouched a little, the way you do at a sickbed, and put her hand on his arm and said, so that the nearest 6 people could hear, "Darling, you have been unwell for months. Nobody thinks any less of you. Let me get Desmond and we'll go upstairs." "Desmond's here," Callum said. Desmond Vale was standing at the end of the room, straight as a post, waiting to be asked. "Mr. Vale, would you tell everyone what you have been buying for this house since April, and who asked you to?" Desmond told them. He told it plainly in 19-year-old service English, without adjectives, that Mrs. Ashford had spoken to him in the morning room in confidence, that she had said Mr. Rhodes's allergy had worsened, that a doctor had recommended changing certain suppliers, that it had to be done without Mr. Rhodes's knowledge because he would refuse out of pride, and that he had reordered on the standing account every Tuesday since and carried it in from the van himself. Camille's hand was still on Callum's arm. It had stopped moving. "Thank you," Callum said. "Mrs. Marsh," and Yvette came out of his kitchen in her apron with a tin in her hand and stood where the whole room could see her. "This is the oil we cook with," she said. "It's been on a standing order for years. Same tin, same shelf. It's the one thing in that kitchen I never read, because it never changes." She turned it round. "This is not the oil we cook with. The label's near enough. The pour's thinner. It's been coming in since April, and I have cooked everything that man has eaten in it since April, and if he had died at this table tonight, I would have been the one who fed it to him." 40 people looked at the tin. "And I want to say the next part myself," Yvette said, "because I'm the one who got it wrong." She looked at the crate by the back door. "Come here, baby." Simone came and stood next to her mother, and did not enjoy it, and stayed. "My daughter told me about this 3 weeks ago," Yvette said. "She told Mr. Rhodes too. I sent her out of the kitchen for it, and I apologized for her, and I let them suspend me rather than say she might be right. And I want everybody in this room who has ever had somebody small tell them something to hear that out loud." 9 times, Simone said. The room turned to her. "He got sick 9 times before the doctor came again," she said. "That's 10. She had her hands behind her back. All of them were days when she was home. And she washes the little spoon herself after, in the sink, and she's never washed anything." Camille Ashford took her hand off Callum's arm. She looked around the long room at 40 faces, and she was clever, and she found nothing there at all, because there was no next sentence that worked, and every single person in that house had just watched her decline a mouthful of her own cooking. Nobody applauded. That was not the sort of room it was. Callum stood up. 3 weeks ago, he said, Yvette Marsh was suspended from this house without pay over a temperature log. There is a finding against her name. It went to an agency, and it went into a system, and 2 houses stopped answering her calls because of it. He found the household manager from the agency, 4 seats along. "That finding is withdrawn tonight, in front of everybody in this room, and I will telephone both of those houses myself in the morning. There is no box on that form for what actually happened, so I am using the room instead. Yvette Marsh locked her cold store and logged her temperatures and cooked in this house for 6 years without an error, and the reason she was walked out of it is that her 9-year-old daughter told the truth in my kitchen, and it was inconvenient." Yvette Marsh stood at the front of the long room with 40 people looking at her, and did not cry, because she had decided on the bus that she was not going to. She put her hand on her daughter's shoulder and left it there. The rest of it took a month, and most of it was ordinary, which is how these things really end. Camille was gone from the house that night and dealt with properly afterwards, and Callum took no pleasure in any part of it and did not pretend otherwise. He slept badly for a while. He kept finding himself in the kitchen at odd hours, opening cupboards for no reason. Desmond Vale kept his job. He also got, in writing, a new instruction that he found much harder to accept than dismissal would have been from now on, when anybody in that house told him to do. Something quietly, he was to ask why, and if the answer was not good enough, he was to bring it straight to Callum, and he would never once be thought disloyal for it. He read it twice, standing in the hall, and put it in his inside pocket. Yvette was offered the executive kitchen for the whole group, 26 rooms, the job she had been doing without the title or the daylight for 6 years. She took 3 days. "It isn't the apology," she said when she came back with her answer. "You can keep that, and it isn't the money. I know. It's the hours." She said it flatly, the way her daughter said things. She sleeps at home. She eats at a table that isn't a workplace. That's the whole reason, and I want you to know it, because if the hours change, I'm gone. They won't change, Callum said. The restructure completed on the day it was always going to complete. But a share of what came out of it went to the people who cook and clean and drive in 26 rooms and had never held one. The pot washers, the night crews, the 2 women who do the linen. And when somebody on the board called it sentimental, Callum said that it was, and signed it anyway. On a Thursday in the autumn, at 4:30, a man who had fed several thousand people a night for 17 years sat down at a small table in a flat on the 3rd floor of a building with a broken buzzer and let somebody give him a plate. Simone had made it. It was not very good. There was a great deal of cheese on it. She had read every label out loud before she started, one at a time, the way she had been taught, and her mother had let her. "You don't have to eat it," Yvette said from the doorway. Callum Rhodes picked up his fork. "I do, actually," he said. "Here is what this story leaves behind. The people who cook your food and clean your rooms see your life more clearly than anyone you pay to advise you, because they are the only ones standing close enough with nothing to gain by lying. And a child who has been taught to check will check, even when the answer costs her everything, but she can only be brave once. After that, it is on the adults in the room to be brave back. Believe the small voice the first time. It is very rarely wrong, and it is almost never asked twice. If this story moved you, do me a kindness, like it. Share it with somebody who needs to hear it tonight, and tell us in the comments what you would have done when that plate came down. And subscribe, because there is another story coming next week, and I would like you to be here for it. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.